Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Oxygen Addict Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you, as always, by our sponsors, precisionhydration.com. You can personalize your hydration strategy today with electrolytes in different strengths that match how you sweat. You can get 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15. We're also brought to you by Athletic Greens. The Athletic Greens Ultimate Daily is an all-in-one daily supplement with 75 vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and digestive enzymes. They're all whole food sourced ingredients, and listeners can get 20 free travel packs worth over £60 with your first purchase. Just visit athleticgreens.com/oxygenaddict. All right, now, as I said, a special edition for us today. I've been lucky enough to manage to get over Skype Dr. Anton Krieger. Now, a lot of the long-time listeners will remember Dr. Anton from right in the start of January. We did a special performance and health special edition with him that went for over an hour. And I reached out to Dr. Anton because I wanted to check the advice that I'd been giving my athletes was correct, essentially. It seems like there's so little research around at the moment into how we can best look after our immune systems, how we can most effectively both train for fitness and in a way that doesn't affect our immune systems negatively, that I reached out to him and I said, look, can you essentially just check over the things that I've read, the advice that I'm giving to athletes? And he said, well, why don't I come on the show and give you a chat with loads of different ideas that I've got that can also help as well. So I jumped to the chance. We've got a 45-minute special today with him covering not only the best way that we think you can train during this time of coronavirus to keep yourself safe and also to maintain and build fitness, but also talking about the other key aspects of health as performance as well. Things like sleep, ideal nutrition, managing stress, different supplements, and also some other little training tips that Dr. Anton's picked up along the way as well. So there's a whole ton of information in here. He was kind enough to send through a whole bunch of stuff for us to go in our show notes. So loads of resources you can click, super comprehensive. So I'd encourage you to go over there and have a really good read of that. One tip he said was, don't read anything about coronavirus for more than 15 minutes. Just skim over stuff and see if you can pick up some of the general points there. Now, one thing he contacted me after we recorded this and said to point out, we talk in this about supplements and we talk about particularly immune boosting vitamins being vitamins A, C, and D. And he mentioned to me in an email, he said, look, we say in the podcast to take vitamins A and D in particular to help boost your immune system. And he said there's some evidence to say essentially do that if you're healthy and you haven't caught the virus. If you have got the virus, there's some research to show it might be in your best interest to stop taking it while you are recovering from the virus, as it were. So that's one little added caveat on there. So again, Dr. Anton is an anaesthetologist by trade and works in ICU, spending a lot of time in ICU at the moment. But he is also a functional health specialist, if you like. So he's qualified in the Institute for Functional Medicine, a member of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and has completed their intensive Applying Functional Medicine in Clinical Practice course. So essentially, he specializes in helping people track down what's going wrong with their health and how to best put it right in an all-over top-down view rather than just trying to fix the problem. Actually trying to fix the root of it rather than just treating the symptoms. So yeah, without any further ado, I really hope you get a lot from this. Back with our normal schedule next week. I've got an interview with World 70.3 champion Gustav Eden that's going to go out early next week. So watch out for that, and hand you over to today's episode with Dr. Anton Krieger. Right, Dr. Anton Krieger, it's great to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to me and the listeners. Obviously, we had you back on the show back in January, and you did a fantastic job back then of helping us all understand, how to make best use of our time and training and health and nutrition and all manner of different things. What we wanted to do today was to have a chat regarding essential elements of what we can do training around coronavirus, keeping ourselves as healthy as possible. So either we minimize the chance of getting it or we keep ourselves as healthy as we can when we do have it. And also, just from my point of view, I've said to you before we went on air, I did the best that I could to try and find some scientific studies to give people advice and to give my own athletes advice on how to train during this time. But it's great to go to the source, and it's great to talk to someone who knows what they're doing. So first up, welcome back to the show. How are you dealing with all of this at the moment? And I know you're in ICU a lot of the time helping people out, aren't you?
Yeah, so hi again, Robin. Thanks very much for the invite back to the show. And yes, I'm heavily involved on the front line at the moment. So during the chat, I can come at it from several aspects. One is just like all your listeners, triathlete, endurance athlete, trying to maintain things as safely as possible during this practice. But then also combine that with what I'm actually seeing clinically on the coalface. As well as my background knowledge around the sports science and lifestyle medicine, which I do as the sort of sideline clinic with athletes and patients. And as you say, there's so much information out there. Everybody's getting information overloaded. It's mostly probably increasing anxiety and making it very difficult to make decisions. Added to that, we really all understand that what we know about this virus, we've known for about 3 to 4 months. So we're learning a huge amount every week. And from a pure scientific point of view in treatments, anything most scientists say this week may have changed next week. And that's not because of bad science. It's just we're on such a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
But the fundamentals don't go away. When we think of things fundamentally, there are two really key bits. What things can we do to boost the function of our immune systems so that we can both either avoid this in the first place, or if we get it, not get it badly. And the other bit around that is obviously the converse is what things do we need to avoid that's going to depress our immunity. And coupled with that is trying to reduce any inflammation in our bodies. But the first bit before I really chat much in detail is obviously at the first end, anything that I say in the podcast is not directed at any individual personal medical advice. The usual disclaimer as I did in your first podcast. We have to cover ourselves in this day and age. So I'm really speaking generically and in generalized terms rather than giving any individual specific medical advice. And the first thing before we go into any sort of detailed chat, everything that the Department of Health and the government and Boris Johnson have put out, I would just absolutely emphasize and sort of emphasize how important this whole flattening of the curve is by adhering to the social isolation, social distancing, not touch your face, wash your hands, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've been the next bit is really almost in a way not to add further to anxieties, but really to help people take that message seriously and adhere to it. I've been practicing for 26 years now. I've been doing intensive care medicine for most of that time. I've been a consultant in intensive care units for 15 years, and I've never seen anything close to this.
Yeah.
So anything that's contradicting that on the internet and downplaying it and saying it is just the influenza is completely inaccurate. So I just thought I'd get that out of the way.
No, I think that's a really important and a really human place to start. Really, is obviously your job is working in ICU every day, and on the one hand, it's funny, I view this and I think, well, this is a triathlon podcast. I want to get information out to triathletes about how they can keep safe when they're training, but the other side of it is the purely human side. We're perhaps not at the point in the curve yet where very many people know of very many personal people who it's affected in their lives. Obviously, you're in a position where you see this. And to me, I can read things on the internet and I can see things on the BBC. It doesn't bring it home to you until a friend of yours is seriously ill or a relative of yours is seriously ill or, God forbid, dies from it. So I think it's really important to have you say that on a day-by-day basis. Things are very, very different in ICU than they were just a week or two ago, aren't they?
Absolutely, and it is really changing daily, because I've been dealing with the first of this for probably 3 weeks, and I've just come off working day shifts on ICU the past 2 days, and there's been a real shift change in the intensity of what I was dealing with over just the previous week and weekend. So, but what I will also say is, this is the sort of thing that the NHS is absolutely awesome at.
Yeah.
And it is rising to the occasion. We've got, certainly locally, we've got excellent leadership, excellent teams. Everybody's just getting on with it. Nobody's moaning. We're pivoting and adapting hourly. We're coming up with very innovative solutions to problems, to shortages, to whatever's happening. So I'm pretty confident we can deal with it, but we can probably only deal with it if the public do what they've been told to do and make it manageable.
Yeah.
And it's really just about what we call fitting the train through the tunnel. So just controlling the increase in numbers at a manageable rate.
Yeah.
And that is key. But I suppose the other bit of this, part of the reason I mentioned that is, although I'm like most, I look after myself very well, as you know, I'm fit, but I'm turning 50, so I'm moving up into that high risk age group, but fit. But I'm getting exposed to higher viral loads than any of your average listeners. So everything we're going to be talking about, I'm putting this very much into practice.
Yeah.
Because I need to protect myself, also not to bring things home to my young family, but also to ensure I don't disappear out of the workforce.
Yeah.
And put my colleagues under an increasingly heavier rota, because we know up to 20% of us might become ill, and it's not just what happens to us, but it's also the fact that the system then falls down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all this is everything I talk about here is what I'm implementing.
Well, let's start with this, and let's start by talking about training, and let's talk about. I'll go through with you what I've done with my athletes based on the limited papers that I could find and read, and then we can discuss whether you think that what we're doing is right or what else we can add to this. Because my first concern when we became aware of this was, okay, what effect does me giving my athletes their kind of standard training week, if you like, what effect does that have on their immune system? And is there a danger that either a specific amount of intensity training or a specific amount of volume training is going to significantly depress their immune system responses? Because the first thing I want to do is make sure I do no harm to my athletes. You know,
absolutely.
I'm really aware that a certain moderate amount of training is going to strengthen their immune system, but above a certain level, we've all experienced training too hard or too long and ending up with a cold. And so my starting point was, my God, we don't want to do that to somebody and mean that they're compromised in an immune system so they can't respond if they do come across the bug. So what would your first takes on that be?
I absolutely agree with that. Obviously, everything around this will not have direct research published data for coronavirus itself, but clearly we can extrapolate from all prior research to do with the immune function and infections in general. And we got studies going back to the early 1990s to show that that exercise and developing infections or depressed immunity has what we call a J-shaped curve. And by that I mean, if you can picture, or your listeners can picture, immunity or immune function on a y-axis, and training or exercise or amount of exercise on the x-axis. If we have almost no exercise or very small amounts of exercise, immune depression will go up and infections will go up. So people don't do anything are going to have a weaker immune system and get more infection and probably get a worse coronavirus outcome. And then as we move into a sort of optimal amount of exercise, we have a strengthening of our immune system and less infections. But then once we go beyond a certain point, we have quite a sharp upward curve. So you can see almost that J, reverse J.
Yeah.
And then we get an increase in infection. And I think every athlete's experienced that when they just push the limit a bit too much, they wake up with sore throats. There's very high incidence of people having an infection immediately after an Ironman and that week afterwards. Olympic athletes just following competition. So the problem is nobody will know exactly for each individual what that cut point is of where you're overreaching. But to me, what seems obvious and sensible is that we significantly limit or stop altogether our high-intensity interval training and a lot of the sort of sweet spot training and focus very, very much on zone 2 training.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways that we can recognize that. That may be putting the limit at 60 to 70% of FTP. It may be that your entire workout, whether you're running or cycling, should be able to be done as nasal breathing only. That's very well correlated with that level of zoning. Obviously, it's a conversational speed, or it's the typical MAF 180 minus your age heart rate, and then take 5 or 10 beats off of you. If you're not conditioned, add a bit on if you are. And I tend to find that you have to take another 10 beats off that for cycling.
Yeah.
My MAF running heart rate's about 10 beats higher than my cycling, and I think that's pretty common.
Too. Yeah.
So, and to be honest, I don't think that's a bad way to do. Now, obviously, a lot of athletes will say, "Well, that's boring. It's just doing the same thing all the time." But tough. I think nobody knows when we're going to race again. There's no urgency at the moment to be doing any other zones. If we do nothing but build up a decent volume in these zones, we're going to stay safe. We're likely going to boost our immune system, and we're not going to depress it. And when we know when we can race again, we're still going to get, most races are going to end up giving at least 6 to 8 weeks warning of a date. And if things are clear to change, we all know that if you've given yourself a really solid volume of aerobic conditioning, you can convert very quickly into race conditioning with 6 to 8 weeks of intensity thrown in.
Yeah.
And probably a lot of people are going to be better off. They're going to build a resilient system, some more robustness. So yeah, that'd be my take. A few other ideas I do have around it. I think if one does want to do some kind of sort of intensity, I think, and again, I don't have published data to go with this apart from some sports science data around recovery from it. But there's the very similar concept to HIIT is HIRT. I'm not sure if you come across HIRT, HIRT training.
No, go on. Tell me what that is.
So that's where you do extremely short duration. So we're talking 10 to 15 second all-out intervals where you're essentially really just using creatine phosphate stores in the muscle. And it's more neuromuscular. But it gives you very big boosts in testosterone and growth hormone and potentially immunity. But you then take very long rests. So you're not causing any anaerobic training effects. So you're not accumulating lactate. So I would typically do this on a grassy hill as an all-out uphill sprint because biomechanically then you've got good form. You've got no risk of straining a calf muscle and that sort of thing because you're running uphill. And you're really just sprinting for 10 seconds. You then walk back down, you stand around, you stroll around, you're getting full recovery. So 2 minutes recovery, and you might do 5 to 6 reps. Easy warm up, warm down. The whole thing's done in 20, 25 minutes. You feel great. You're not really stressing the system.
Yeah.
You're getting a full recovery, but you're getting some other boost and some mental boosting, and then maybe also it's just giving you some variety. You can obviously do that on the trainer. It's not taking the toll that 1 minute on, 1 minute off, et cetera, all these other kind of standardized interval training. Yeah. Literally, if you do it on the bike, you do 10 maximum 15 seconds all out, and then you'd literally sit on the bike for 2 minutes, or you'd soft pedal, with almost no resistance. With high cadence. So that's something that I put out there as a concept. The other thing I really would think that we need to think about exercise-wise is, spin this thing around positively. This is a time to work on good form, to work on strength. I don't know if you've ever come across the Balanced Runners site with Jay Grunker.
No, haven't. No, go on.
She's got this excellent system where she uses something called the Feldenkrais technique that involves retraining brain pathways using very specific ways you train movement for running. And she comes at it from a completely different angle to standard running form coaches, but she gets fantastic results. So I've done quite a bit of her stuff. And she's really almost magically cured IT band problems, plantar fasciitis, etc. And really looking at where the source is coming from. Often, the problem in the ankle is the way you're moving your arms, sort of thing. But a lot more detail. But during COVID, she's been doing a daily a running tip and form thing, 10, 15 minutes long on YouTube each day. Now, this is not normally, I never have time to do Jay's programs. But now's the time that watch the 15 minutes, then maybe do a few of those drills around the garden or your allowed time outside, and get that stuff sorted out. So when things are back to normal, you're a better runner, or you're less injured. The other thing I think comes in is the concept of micro workouts and exercise snacks. I think one of the issues with athletes is that they think by training 2 hours a day after work at night, but then sitting sedentary at a desk for 8 hours a day means they're super healthy. Whereas we know from many, many studies that if you sit for 6 to 8 hours a day, all sorts of bad things happen and your lifespan is shortened. And that is not negated by doing your 2 hours workout.
Got you.
So this is an opportunity if you're working from home that you schedule that in. That you might be doing some computer-based work, but every hour you get up and you do 10 burpees, or you do 20 air squats, or you have a pull-up bar inside and you walk underneath it, and the rule is you've got to do 5 pull-ups.
Or stretch cords for the swim or anything like that,
whatever.
Where you're just doing a couple of minutes of work. I like that.
Exactly, and you can call these exercise snacks micro workouts. Now, they're only going to help your immune system because you don't think of them as a workout. Because you're doing something that takes 2 minutes. The idea is that you do it with perfect strictness and perfect control. You might do 10 push-ups and you try and have every muscle contracted, your core switched on, going slowly, elbows into the sides, that whole thing. And it's done in 30 seconds. You've done it very well rather than doing 5 sets of 20 badly all over the place. But then also it's not taking anything out of you. It's not really a workout. But if you do that over the course of the whole day, every half an hour to an hour, you'll have done 200 push-ups at the end of the day with perfect execution. So I think these are all sorts of things to plumb into the day. And it's not just going to boost the immune system. You're going to come out of it stronger, more resilient. They're going to help to improve mental health because we know all this regular exercise is going to boost brain hormones because there's going to be a huge mental health aspect to the social isolation. And obviously that figures into immunity. So those are my kind of general thoughts around training. Obviously, I'm using the stretch cords myself. Again, when it comes to the swimming and the stretch cords, I know in the past when I've used stretch cords, I've done it in a pretty useless way in that I've sort of just done a front crawl movement with, and I've got bored after 2 minutes and done a random number of strokes. What I've tried to do now is actually try to do it 3 times a week that I would have done my swim sessions. Dave Scott did quite a nice video on YouTube of an actual workout that took about 10 minutes, and I've just copied his because it ticked all the boxes, and it means it is now structured. It's kind of a butterfly movement, 40 reps. Then you're extending the triceps a bit more. Then you're doing a crawl movement. Then sort of a bit of a rowing movement, etc., etc. Set numbers of reps, set movements, and then you're doing it with purpose and with just like you would at the pool. You're going and doing your exact repeats, etc.
Yeah, great. I'm a really big fan of that. Actually, we've introduced that for our athletes over the last week, where they just have 2 10-minute sessions with the stretch cords, and the number of people who've said, "I wouldn't have believed that I could get sore the day after from doing." 3 sets of 6 or 3 sets of 8, but it absolutely engages muscles that you wouldn't otherwise be using, doesn't it?
It does. You can feel your lats. And interestingly, as timing had it, I actually went for a swim smooth technique session with Emma
Emma Brunning.
Emma Brunning up in Lancaster, about a week before the lockdown. So,
perfect.
So I had about one or two pool sessions after getting that lesson. But I'm trying to use mental imagery and so on with the chords to put into place what she showed me with my stroke. And I'm sure that it is going to come into place when I do actually get back in the water.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I'm trying to ingrain that movement of where I need my arm to be and elbows to be, etc., with the chords.
Sorry, I was just going to say, going back to the training thing. Now, you talked a lot there about intensity. What guidelines would you think we've got in terms of volume of training for kind of daily volume or weekly volume for athletes? Is it possible even to give guidance on that around how much exercise is going to, how long is long before that starts to depress the immune system?
Yeah, there's no science out there, and I don't think there ever will be, because as you would expect, every individual's immune system is going to be different.
Yeah.
And one person might get away with 3 hours, another person might be half an hour. And then there's going to be so many variables, isn't it? It's going to be your genome or genetics. It's going to be your underlying metabolic health. It's going to be how immune damaging or boosting your nutrition is, how well you've slept. So many factors. I would say, as a simple rule of thumb, I don't think there's any value in exceeding an hour.
Okay.
Even in zone 2. And to be honest, if you did an hour of zone 2 every day, if you did 7 hours of zone 2 per week, you're not going to lose fitness.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily going to be gaining. If you were training a lot before, you're not going to be progressing, but you're not going to lose anything. And then when things open up, you're going to very quickly be ready to boost it from there.
I was talking with a friend, and we were saying it's almost like it's a real opportunity for everyone to do a block of what would have been considered old school, traditional winter base building training, where you just go and train for an hour every day, or maybe a little bit more at the weekends if you have time.
Yeah.
And no one really has time to do that in their everyday life, and everyone tries to squeeze in more intensity. But 7 hours of aerobic training a week is a lot of training for most people.
It's as much as what most age groupers are going to do normally anyway.
Yeah.
And look, if you add on this concept that I've described of micro workouts, I would see that as separate.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to do anything to your immune system if you're doing 2 minutes here and 5 minutes there.
Yeah.
But as I said, if you sum total that over the course of the whole day, you're actually gaining a lot more training effect.
Yeah.
Without that, really, probably I wouldn't expect that to do any overall damage.
Yeah.
So you could look at it as having your actual defined 1 hour of zone 2 sitting on your bike doing Zwift or whatever. Again, I'd be very careful there with Zwift of not entering Zwift races and stuff like that, because people can't control themselves, and then it will end up being a massive high intensity session. So but I would think that you could look at those two separately. So what I would be suggesting, as I say, this isn't based on solid science, but it is what most other people are suggesting, is sort of put a limiter on more or less an hour of zone 2 as a continuous bike or run or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I think you could safely on top of that put in these little bits of body weight exercise or swing a kettlebell or whatever as little bursts of things in between. I mean, if you were going to do a solid hour of body weight or kettlebell or weight training, then that would be instead of that hour on the bike.
Yeah. But just those, I like the idea of those little micro bursts. So what did you call them? Exercise snacks through the day. If you set your alarm to beep every hour and you did 5 press-ups or 10 press-ups on the hour, you could get 50 press-ups done during a day, couldn't you, without really realizing it?
Easily. I mean, I've done 50 pull-ups today, and that's just been wandering outside doing 5 reps at a time every half hour or whatever when I want to stretch my legs.
We should probably point out to people to build up to that gradually rather than going 50 on day one. We might have some sore athletes if we don't do.
Or just scale the exercise, or and do whatever you fancy. It could be air squats, could it be some jumping jacks, or if you've got a kettlebell, you do some kettlebell swings, or a goblet or get it, whatever. I mean, there are endless the options. There's a Canadian very famous sports scientist, Jonathan Little, who's published a lot of research around this concepts of exercise snacks and micro workouts. A lot of his work has looked at metabolic health and improving people's blood sugar dysregulation by doing this. The other thing, and this will come into it when we talk about nutrition and other bits, but one of the things that I'm seeing in the published literature around the patients who we're seeing in the hospital with more severe COVID-19, and we're seeing in the published literature, is certainly all the risk factors, as the newspapers have probably been pointing out, is older patients who have type 2 diabetes, who have high blood pressure, who have cardiac disease, and so on. But the one factor that really underlies getting all of those conditions is losing control of your blood sugar, or what we call insulin resistance, over time. Now, as people age, that happens anyway, and that may be the major reason why the older people are the higher risk they are for this disease.
Okay.
And it is one of the major factors for leading to high blood pressure. It is obviously it is diabetes by definition, is insulin resistance, and so on. So anything that's going to make you more insulin sensitive and less insulin resistant is potentially, we don't have trials yet to back this up, but in fact I'm busy designing one myself at the moment in terms of measuring whether this is the case, is potentially going to help you, A, less likely to catch it in the first place, and B, hopefully get it less severely. Now, that's one of the things, that simple things that helps with that is timing of these exercise snacks. If you just walk for 10 to 15 minutes after eating a meal, even if it's a meal with more sugar in it, your body shifts that sugar much more rapidly into your skeletal muscle stores, and you have less of a change in your blood sugar. So again, timing of when you do a little bit of exercise can make a difference.
Okay.
And the longer your blood sugar is raised, that depresses your immune function. So it's all together. This thing around the insulin resistance seems to have multiple reasons. One is if you're insulin resistant, it depresses the immune system, but it also causes more inflammation. And it does seem as it may have a role in how the virus gets into the cell and how the virus multiplies.
Right, okay.
We haven't proven it yet, but we're starting to see these biological indications of that.
Okay.
In early research. So that comes into play in terms of sleep, in terms of stress, and in terms of nutrition.
Well, let's go on to talk about nutrition now then, because this seems to be a good place to go into that then. What are the kind of things that we can do that will help boost our immune system to help us prevent getting it, but then if we do happen to get it, to help us recover from it faster?
So in terms of prevention, it's a bit as I said now, we want to try and be as insulin sensitive as possible. We want at the same time avoid eating things going to be inflammatory, and we want to eat things that are anti-inflammatory. And so if I sort of break that down a little bit, and a lot of this goes back to what's just good general advice that we probably all know already.
Yeah.
So we want to try and eat whole foods where possible and avoid processed foods. Processed foods in general are going to be higher in sugar and higher in inflammatory vegetable oils, which are all going to increase inflammation. We want to try and eat as many vegetables as possible, but also try and eat a variety. And we talk about eating the colors of the rainbow. And part of the reason that's important is that these colors of the rainbow, those colors are what we call phytochemicals in the vegetables. And these are things that can helpfully stimulate our immune system and potentially help in boosting them, along with providing all those good vitamins and minerals that are going to help boost things. We want to eat enough protein because protein isn't just there for building muscle and bone and that sort of thing. But if you think about it, our immune system in terms of antibodies are made from proteins.
Okay.
So having enough protein on board is going to help to build the building blocks of your immune system.
Got it. Yeah.
So in terms of actual foods, as I said, clearly plenty of vegetables, all the colors of the rainbow if we can. Plenty of cold water oily fish. That's our salmon, trout, herring, sardines, mackerel, all that sort of thing, because we're going to get a really nutrient dense protein. We're going to get and we're going to get our essential fatty acids, which are also anti-inflammatory, but also helpful in the immune system. And then good quality meat, etc. We would be advisable, and I know you had a fantastic podcast I listened to yesterday with Alan from the Performance Chef, and that was all great advice, and I also do appreciate that it isn't a time to add additional stress to people to try and cut back or be restrictive on things.
Yeah.
But and you were talking about, don't worry if we have the odd digestive biscuit here and there. But at the same time, I think do try to minimize that where we can, because we're going to be more vulnerable to that now, where you're sitting in the house all day and the cupboard's over there and you can walk past and grab something every 5 minutes. One strategy is, just try and minimize the amount of that stuff that's actually brought into the house, because what isn't there can't be eaten.
Do you know, one of my athletes posted a photo yesterday in our Facebook group of the inside of his fridge, and he'd stuck a piece of paper inside the fridge, so when he opened it, the A4 was hanging down and it said, "You're not hungry, you're just bored."
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, with what we're seeing around possibly this insulin and sugar related linkage with infection, this may be a time while people are only training at low levels, doing aerobic endurance training, to have a little experiment with the lower carb side of things. And I'm not suggesting they go ketogenic or ultra low carb, but this may be, just like we're saying, use as an opportunity to work on form for your running or a bit of strength work. This may be the time to do a bit of safe experimentation, because you're not going to be racing. You're not going to be doing a high intensity session that you might struggle if you're not fat adapted to cope with it. So maybe it is a time to experiment a bit with that, with some possible side benefits to it. And there's plenty of resource out there around that, and I can provide you some very good athlete level, sports science level resource for trying that out.
Great. Well, we'll make sure we get all that stuff. We'll add that into the show notes, actually.
I'll send you all the relevant links.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I'm thinking other specific stuff related to food is obviously around nutraceuticals and minerals and vitamins. Now, none of what we will say around that is clearly evidence-based on coronavirus and any coronavirus, because, as we said, it's so new, it's novel, we don't know. Yeah. It's all been extrapolated from infections in general and from cold viruses and influenza viruses.
Okay.
So some of what I say now may be wrong next week. So I reserve that right to contradict myself, because that's just being good science and good research.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is to move dynamically with the latest evidence. But in general, we say things that are helpful are vitamin A, vitamin D, zinc, copper, garlic, the turmeric as a herb, ginger. All of these are potentially helpful, both as preventatives, and then also vitamin C, the other, obviously, and then taking when one is ill. Obviously, when we're ill, the first thing is to speak to your healthcare provider locally for them to decide whether you need COVID testing, to decide whether you're safe to self-isolate, or whether your symptoms require you to come into hospital, etc. But I'm really referring to when you've done that already and it's deemed that you're safe to stay at home.
Yeah.
Then clearly you want to hydrate as well as possible. And you don't want to be doing any of this exercise. I would suggest that you just listen to your body and you sleep as much as you possibly can and do as little as possible. Something like bone broth would be very useful, because it can help with it's excellent for maintaining gut health. And we know the microbiome of our gut that we spoke about last time also has a role in inflammation in our bodies and in immune health and immune function. So it wouldn't do any harm to maintain our gut health. And bone broth has also got lots of minerals in it. So it can help keep you hydrated, make sure that your mineral balance is good, and maintain your gut barrier and your gut health, immune health. Amongst the show notes, the Institute for Functional Medicine has just yesterday produced a comprehensive list of nutraceuticals for providers to give out to patients, and that's one of the website links I'll give you.
Great, thank you.
They've got downloads there, and on that site they've also given the references and evidence for each of those nutraceuticals and the suggested dosaging. The only issue at the moment is, I know from buying stuff myself and referring my own clients for some of these things, is that, as you can imagine, as soon as somebody hears zinc's good, you can't find zinc anywhere, or copper's good, you can't find. So whatever I say, unfortunately, people may struggle. But most of these things I'm suggesting, you will be able to get in through good food intake.
Yeah.
And when it comes to vitamin D, we've got the light back now. Get in the sun as much as you can, sit outside.
Okay.
The best vitamin D is from the sun. No supplement provides it as effectively as sunlight.
There we go. We've got a doctor here prescribing sunbathing in the safety of our own back gardens there. So what more could we ask for, hey?
Absolutely.
Well, that's been great, mate. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you think you can add at this point? Obviously, from a broader point of view as a doctor, we've got your experience of working in ICU. I know a lot of my friends are split as to whether or not, on the one hand, people are going outside to ride their bikes and it's their stress relief for the day. On the other hand, they're saying, I don't feel like we should really go out and ride our bikes, even if we're, 2 or 3 meters apart. Are we putting each other at danger? Are we putting each other at danger just by riding and potentially increasing the stress on the burden on the NHS if one of us has an accident? I don't know whether you've got an opinion on that for us.
Yeah, so in terms of opinion, obviously I have to go with I would be going with the official recommendations around the distancing, etc. I think a lot of common sense. From a common sense point of view, I think cycling outdoors, my view would be not. We can get the training effect very effectively indoor biking. And in fact, what you could do is put your indoor bike outside in your garden, and if you want the fresh air and the sun, get the sun on you on your stationary trainer. And the reason I say that, if you're cycling on your own, there's going to be zero infection transmission risk.
Yeah.
And if you're cycling with one other person and you're a few meters apart, there'll also be zero infection risk, as long as you're not stopping and standing and talking to each other, because just the movement of air and wind is going to disperse any virus particle, and you're sufficiently far apart. But the reason I wouldn't do it then is just the risk of falling off and trauma. And we just don't want any of you taking up any space in the operating theatre when we're steadily converting these theatres into intensive care beds.
Yeah.
So it's just a stupid extra load to put on the system, which is unnecessary. I think probably it's reasonable to go for a run on your own, because you'd like to think, unless you're incredibly clumsy, you're far lower risk of fracturing yourself and ending up in ED and on an orthopedic fracture list for running. So that would just be common sense side of things.
And in terms of your ICU, what capacity did your ICU beds have before, and what's it been expanded to? So
we're expanding as we need to, as patients come in. The officially all ICUs in England have been told to plan for an expansion of up to 7 to 8 times what our normal capacity is.
Wow.
Now that's obviously that's based on these modelling, which the public have seen as well. So nothing I'm saying here is not in the public domain anyway. Now, obviously, we're not anywhere near that yet. But every part of the country is being hit slightly differently, and obviously cities are being hit harder for obvious reasons. There's a higher population density, and so people have obviously spread it far easier.
Yeah.
If you go for a stroll in London, you're going to pass several hundred people in 2 minutes and breathe on them. So they've got much bigger numbers more quickly. And then there's variation across regions, but we're already significantly higher than normal. I probably need to be careful about giving specifics.
Sure.
But the plans are all in place to cope with this. But there obviously will be a limit. So we've got to, and those plans we have in place are going to be largely based on what we've told the public to do working.
Yeah. So we're going to try and keep the numbers down as much as we possibly can and not end up in your emergency room because we've fallen off our bike or tripped over running. That's the message there.
Exactly. We can do without silly things because it's obviously all the normal things people come to hospital with haven't gone away.
Yeah, right.
It's the COVID on top of that. So and as we know, our system has always been operating at near capacity before we had this.
Hey, well, listen, on behalf of all our listeners, I want to say thank you to you and all your colleagues because you guys are the heroes out there keeping us all safe at the moment. So thank you very much. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on and be able to record this for us. Because I think what you've said is going to help an awful lot of people out, man.
No, pleasure, Rob. And just the passing word, because we didn't get to it, I would emphasize people revisiting the first podcast because sleep, again, is an absolutely key bit of immune function.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. We didn't get around to that, did we?
No, sleep and stress together, and both of those are going to take a knock for multiple reasons. People are anxious and stressed, so that's going to affect them going to bed, but they've also lost normal routine, and they're probably binge-watching Netflix and treating it like a holiday and going to bed at different times. So all I'd say is try and make the day structured, set schedules, and try to go to bed at the same time every day, wake up the same time, and make it 10 p.m. and not midnight. That's what I'm doing. I'm focusing more than ever on sleep because I need to be ready for these shifts on ICU.
Okay.
And I take that as the number one thing now is my sleep and stress control.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because of course, looking at that through the lens of what we talked about last time, your 5 performance killers, the sleep and the stress are two of just as important as nutrition and training and recovery. So I hadn't thought of it in those terms, actually. Getting yourself to bed at 10 o'clock and saying, this is something that I can do to actively help boost my immune system just as much as taking vitamins or eating properly. Absolutely.
And there's endless research around that, immune function and sleep and stress and sleep. So they like you said, they're equal. The nutrition, the exercise, the sleep, and the stress are all equal in that paradigm of not getting this or dealing with it well if you get it.
Fantastic. All right, man. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I hope we can catch up with you again soon. And all the best to you and your colleagues as you go forward and save the world.
Cheers, Rob. Thanks very much, and go well too. Take care.
Okay, guys, I hope you got a lot from that. I certainly found it very interesting, and there's lots of nice little ideas in there that I'm going to take away and try with my athletes. Ideas such as doing those 7 to 15 second max effort type sprints on the bike, which I've been shying away from doing, and we'll do some of those with full recoveries. And more than anything, it'll just be something different to mix up the training. And there's also some good tips there to go and look at some running drills. And I think wise words to just spend this time rather than getting bored. There's lots of stuff you can do. Get up from your desk, do a few exercises, carry on working again. I've instigated this today. And I've been doing just 5 press-ups, getting up, doing 5 press-ups and sitting back down again. So it's given me a bit of inspiration as well. So thanks very much, Dr. Krieger. It was great talking to you. And remember, listeners, a shout out to our sponsors. Remember, Precision Hydration, you can get 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15, and you can visit athleticgreens.com/OxygenAddict to get 20 free travel packs worth over £60 with your first purchase. And you can also get 50% off your first blood test at thriver.co using the code OxygenAddict50. So remember, there's links in the show notes for all of those sponsors, so you don't have to remember them. And there's tons of extra stuff as well that Dr. Krieger sent through. Next episode up in a few days, we have got World 70.3 Gustav Eden. So really excited to have that. It's a great interview with him. Until then, have a great, safe training and racing weekend, everybody. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast. See ya.